Write up the divorce papers and get out right now. I have no intention of living with you anymore. My husband Edward returned from his overseas business trip, bringing along his mistress, 12 years his junior, and their secret elementary school-aged child. And now, he suddenly tells us to get out of the house. Despite his own infidelity, he has the audacity to act all high and mighty. Unable to stand it any longer, our daughter Margaret delivers a shocking statement to her father. "Dad, you don't know anything, do you? You'll regret saying things like that. It's because you keep treating Mom so badly that this is happening." What on earth are you talking about? I don't understand what you're saying at all. Are you that upset about being abandoned by me? I think you'll understand everything once you see this. It's not like I'm upset about being abandoned by you, Dad. As long as I have Mom, I can live happily. What do you mean, once I see this? As Edward peers at her smartphone, his face instantly turns pale. He must have realized the gravity of what he has done. My name is Kristen, and I'm 44 years old. I have only one child, Margaret, whom I gave birth to shortly after starting my career. Margaret, who I thought was little, has suddenly become a college student. I always thought I was the more mature one, but she has grown up completely and surpasses me in many ways. I came from a poor family, so I always attended public schools. As for college, I had to pay my own tuition while attending. I hated that so much that we, as parents, are paying for her tuition. However, she doesn't take it for granted and is incredibly grateful to us. She always expresses her gratitude, so as a mother, I often think she's grown up to be a good kid. Mom, I'm having so much fun in college. I didn't think it would be such an enjoyable place, so I'm really happy. Thank you for letting me go to college even though the tuition is high. I'm happiest when you're enjoying yourself, Margaret. I know there will be hard times along with the fun, but do your best. If anything happens, you can always come to me. I think it's such a luxury to be able to study. Since you're paying for my tuition, I'll work hard at studying too. I've decided to get a good job and be a filial daughter. When did you become a child who could say such things? I'm so glad you've grown up to be such a good kid, Margaret. We should thank Dad too for paying your tuition. Of course I'm grateful to Dad too, but Mom is number one. You work and do all the housework, which I think is really amazing. Dad doesn't do any housework at all, which I think is terrible. I do wish he would do a little housework. But Dad works hard at his job, so it's hard for me to say anything. But I do think things can't go on like this. Edward travels frequently for work, both domestically and internationally, and does practically no housework. Of course, he earns a good income because of all the business trips, but I wish he would spend a little more time with us. Money is important, but when we spend so little time together, I start to wonder what we got married for. It's no exaggeration to say that I raised her almost entirely on my own until she became a college student. So Margaret isn't attached to Edward at all, and in fact, dislikes him for neglecting our family. I want us to be a happy family, so I do wish they would get along, but he's away from home so much that I feel it can't be helped. Why does Dad go on so many business trips? He's been going on trips all the time since I was little. Is he always busy? I don't feel like he values his family. Please don't say such lonely things, Margaret. Dad is working hard for us too. It's because he works so hard that you can go to college. Of course I know that, and I'm grateful, but I do think he's away from home too much. He's not home for more than half the year, and even when he is home, he doesn't even talk to us. He used to talk to us in the past, but lately I feel like he's always on his smartphone. I wonder why he's become like that. I noticed when Margaret pointed it out, but Edward has been acting a bit strange lately. Even when we try to talk to him, he ignores us and is constantly on his smartphone. He's barely home, and even during that time, he won't have a conversation with us, so I really don't know if there's any point in being together." Apparently, she was also concerned about that. It's understandable for her to feel that way when her own father won't talk to her at all. I didn't want Margaret to feel stressed, so I decided to talk to Edward when he got home. "Hey, you haven't been talking to us at all lately. What's going on? You seem to be on your smartphone all the time, and I'm worried about what you're doing." "That's none of your business, is it? It's up to me what I do on my smartphone. I'm not inconveniencing you, so it should be fine." "I know you're busy with work, but I wish you would value your time with family a little more." Margaret seems to feel the same way I do. "We're talking right now, aren't we? We're not newlyweds anymore, so of course we won't talk that much. Margaret should just get a boyfriend and move out." "Why are you saying such lonely things? We're family, so let's get along better. I understand that you're busy with work and tired, but..." "If you understand that I'm tired, then don't talk to me. I don't want to waste energy having conversations all the time. I'm the one earning money, so I don't deserve to be complained at by anyone." "I get it, but you've changed. You were so kind when we got married. You always put Margaret first." "People change over time. She is an adult now, so she should become independent from her parents. Why don't you try letting go of her a little?" "I think it's fine since she's still a student. I'll talk to her about it." I mustered up the courage to talk to him, but Edward shows no signs of changing at all. Instead, he got angry at me for interfering. I never thought things would turn out like this, so I don't know how to react. I couldn't believe that the kind Edward had changed this much. Margaret seemed to have noticed somehow, but I hadn't paid much attention, so I had no idea. When did he really become like this? He acts like he doesn't care about family at all and won't listen to anything I say. Since I had already told Edward, I decided to talk to Margaret just in case. I don't know how Edward will react when he realizes the message hasn't gotten through. "I talked to Dad earlier, and he told me to let go of you. He said you should become independent too, but what do you think about that?" "I think it's fine since you're still a student, but..." "It's terrible for him to say that to you, Mom. I'm loved by you and so happy. And other families get along much better." "I'm so relieved to hear you say that, Margaret. When Dad said it, I wondered if I should let go. But hearing it from you, I don't think I need to yet." "If you were super overprotective, I might say something, you know? But Mom, you keep a really good distance. I find it really easy to live with you." "I had no idea you felt that way, Margaret. If you say so, I'll keep treating you the same way. I'm sorry for making you worry unnecessarily." "Mom, you don't need to apologize at all. I think it's Dad's fault for not doing anything to raise me. How can he act so high and mighty when he doesn't do any parenting?" "He's respected at work, so his need for approval is being met. I'm sure he's on his smartphone working too. But it's really sad that Dad has changed." "Is Dad really working on his smartphone? I'm not even sure if he's really going on business trips. I think we should look into various things." When Margaret said that, it hit me. I've never suspected Edward of cheating. He's always been kind to our family, so I've never once thought he was suspicious. But recently, he hasn't been kind to us, so I thought maybe I should be a little suspicious. I wouldn't have thought about it if Margaret hadn't mentioned it, but I think this might be some kind of turning point. However, I didn't know what to do, so I decided to go on as I had been. While I was doing that, she suddenly told me she had something important to talk about. She's never said that before, so I'm incredibly nervous. "What on earth is this important thing? It's not like you to say that, Margaret. Did something happen at school?" "I'm sorry. It's really hard for me to say, so I'm stumbling over my words. It's something I absolutely have to say, but I wonder what you'll think of me if I tell you, Mom. What? It's such an important thing that you're stumbling over your words. I thought it would be a lighter topic, so I'm getting nervous. But I'll accept anything, so I want you to try talking to me. I think it'll be pretty shocking for you. I'll tell you if you say you'll listen, and I'm not completely sure yet. If you've said this much, it's harder not to listen. I'd like you to tell me everything if you're okay with it, Margaret. Of course, if you don't want to talk, that's totally fine. Actually, I peeked at Dad's smartphone the other day, and it seems like he's cheating. I think he's saying he's on business trips and cheating. What exactly does that mean? I have no idea what you're talking about, Margaret. What kind of messages was he sending on his smartphone? It's too sudden, and I don't know what Margaret is saying. Certainly, we're only told he's going on business trips, so it's unclear if he's really going on them. But his salary is being properly deposited, so I thought he was going on business trips. However, from what Margaret is saying, it seems he is cheating at his business trip destinations. I never even considered that. I don't know how to react. My friends have asked me if I'm not worried about his constant business trips, but I wasn't worried at all. That's because I trusted Edward, and if what Margaret is saying is true, that trust will quickly crumble. Then she told me the contents of Edward's smartphone. It seems there's someone like a mistress at the place he frequently goes on business trips to. There was also a child's name, so he might have a child too. I don't know if it's a stepchild or a secret child, but I can't believe this is happening. If that's true, it's unforgivable. I won't be satisfied unless I get proper revenge. You should get solid evidence and then divorce him. Don't worry about me at all, okay? Thank you so much for saying that. If he is really cheating, I'll divorce him. And if he has a child, that's a pretty big problem. I've got your back, Mom, so don't worry. I'll support you properly. You don't need to show any kindness to him anymore. With Margaret saying that, I have no choice but to do my best. For now, I've decided to investigate to make sure whether Edward is cheating. The investigation is a simple one. I'll check his smartphone while he's sleeping to see who he's in contact with. I thought if I saw the name of the person he's cheating with and the content of the messages, I'd also find out about the child. When I told Margaret about it, she said she'd cooperate. She knows more about smartphones, so I'm very grateful for her help. I decided to take responsibility if anything happens and try to investigate the affair. However, when I picked up the smartphone, there was a passcode on it and I couldn't see the contents. Then she said some comforting words. I peeked when he was on his smartphone the other day, so I know his smartphone passcode. He probably let his guard down thinking you wouldn't find out, Mom. I had no idea you'd go that far for me, Margaret. I never could have done it on my own, so that's a relief. But I'm nervous to look at the contents of the smartphone. Normally, I don't think it'd be nerve-wracking at all. I mean, you're just looking at the contents of a family member's smartphone. In a typical household, there shouldn't be anything you wouldn't want seen. That may be true, but the situation is different this time. What if there's a history with the person he's cheating with in there? I don't think I can handle it emotionally. In a way, it might be good to give up at that point. I mean, you'll have the evidence, so all that's left is to get divorced. I think it's better than feeling vaguely unsettled. When you say that, I'm starting to feel that way. Why are you more put together than me, Margaret? I should be the calm one. I've barely felt any love from Dad in my memory. But it's normal for you, Mom, since you married Dad after dating. I don't want you to be so negative about yourself. Thank you for saying that. I'm a little scared, but let's look at the contents. And so, we decided to look at the contents of Edward's smartphone. If the information Margaret said she saw is true, there should be a message history with the person he's cheating with. Honestly, I don't know if it's better for there to be none or for there to be some. But if he really is cheating, I want to get divorced soon, so I want to get evidence here. As I was thinking that, Margaret unlocked his smartphone for me. When the two of us peeked inside, there was a message history with a woman we didn't know. It seems what Margaret said was true, and apparently Edward is cheating. And when we scrolled back through the messages, we found out they'd had a relationship for nearly 10 years. I can't believe he's been cheating on me for that long. As I was reeling in shock, Margaret gently comforted me. This must be really shocking for you, Mom. But now that we have the evidence, let's think positively. Let's make sure to save the contents of these messages. If I didn't have you, Margaret, I couldn't stay calm. Honestly, I believed in him. I never thought he was actually cheating on me. It's admirable that you believed in him until the end. Dad is the worst for betraying you like this, Mom. We definitely have to knock him down to rock bottom. Lately, I've just been relying on you, Margaret. I feel like I've reached a turning point, so I'm going to get revenge. Let's think about how to get revenge together. Dad is going on a business trip starting tomorrow, right? So we have plenty of time to think. But you absolutely can't show any kindness. Since he cheated, you have to punish him harshly. I understand. I'll harden my heart and get revenge. I'll be counting on you if anything happens, Margaret. But will you be okay if your dad is gone? It's always been like he's not here with all the business trips. At this point, nothing will change if he's gone. I'll protect you when it comes to you, Mom. It's really reassuring and helps so much. If you say that, Margaret, I can get divorced with peace of mind. Let's do our best together from now on. And so we started thinking about how to get back at Edward. I used to feel very lonely when he said he was going on a business trip, but now I'm very grateful. Edward isn't home, so we can plot as much as we want. That said, I've never gotten divorced before, so I don't know what to do. Anyway, I'll prepare for the divorce while consulting with people around me. Of course, he doesn't know that, and I'm sure he's cheating at his business trip destination. I feel bad having Margaret do this as a college student, but it's for Margaret's sake too, so I have no choice but to ask for her cooperation. Margaret seems to want to cooperate and is actively helping. I don't know when she grew up so much, but I'm truly grateful. While we were planning like that, I got a call from Edward at his business trip destination. It's rare for him to call from a business trip, so I think something must have happened. I have something important to talk about when I get back from this business trip. So tell Margaret to be at home. It's about the future, so make absolutely sure to be home. It's scary to have you suddenly say that. It's rare for you to call from a business trip. Did something happen while you were away? I'll give you the details next time, so just wait. This concerns Margaret too. Also, tidy up the stuff in the house as much as you can. Why do I suddenly have to tidy up? Don't tell me we're going on the business trip with you? If so, I wish you'd tell me in advance. Well, it might be something similar to that. Anyway, I think it's best to be ready to leave the house at any time. Also, clean up the room so it's ready for guests. I don't have time for that on such short notice. You know I have a job too, right? Why do you keep saying such selfish things? I'm working on business trips, so put up with it. If you say you can't clean, have Margaret do it. Make sure the room is clean no matter what. Why won't you even tell me who's coming? And if we're going somewhere, I wish you'd tell me. There are too many mysteries. It's hard to deal with. It's not difficult at all, right? Just pack your own things and keep the room clean. If that's too hard, just leave it all to Margaret. Margaret is busy with college too, you know? Why don't you do it together when you get back? Don't dump everything on us. I can tell from the conversation, but Edward is clearly acting strange. It seems like he's plotting something, and it feels like he's smiling a little. I'm sure he intends to do something to us. I don't know what he'll do, but I think I'll prepare so I'm ready for anything. For that, I need to prepare for the divorce too. I have a lot of preparations to make too, so I don't have time to do what he is telling me to do. Those emotions overflowed and I ended up arguing emotionally. But Edward must have something he's really happy about, because he deliberately didn't get emotional and tried to calm me down. I'll make this the last time, so I'm really begging you. I'm coming back with some important guests. I want to welcome them, so please prepare. If you had told me that from the beginning, I would have dealt with it. Why did you talk to me in such a high-handed way? Anyone would hate being spoken to like that. I'm sorry. Please forgive my words and actions earlier. I'll speak more kindly from now on. Is it okay if I really ask just this once? It feels suspiciously kind somehow. You won't even tell me who you're bringing. Well, I'll let it slide just this once. So you'll clean up for me? If so, that would really help. I'll make sure to buy souvenirs on my way back. You haven't brought souvenirs lately, but you're being quite kind. I have no choice, so I'll at least clean for you. Then, I'll be waiting for you to come home. I don't know who Edward is bringing, but the fact that Edward has clearly become kinder means there must be something behind it. It's definitely strange for Edward to approach me from below. Of course, there's a possibility that's not the case, but we need to take some countermeasures too. For that reason, I have no choice but to prepare for divorce before Edward returns. When I told Margaret about the call from Edward, she seemed to have the same opinion as me and said we should prepare quickly. It's definitely suspicious, so let's prepare for various things. But who do you think he's bringing back? He wouldn't bring back the person he's cheating with, right? There's no way he'd bring them to our place. I'm sure he's bringing his boss from work or something. He did say he wanted the room cleaned. You're right. There's no way he'd bring them to our place. That would be like admitting he's cheating. But let's be prepared for anything. I'm so glad I have you on my side, Margaret. If you weren't here, I'd really be struggling. I'm so glad I can be on your side, Mom. I'm sure there will be more hard times ahead, but let's do our best together. Anyway, let's strategize against him. And so Margaret and I started preparing together. Even while preparing, we kept discussing the future. Since we plan to divorce Edward, it's natural for the conversation to go that way. I think Margaret is anxious about what we'll do going forward, so I want to reassure her as much as I can as a mother. For that, I have to do what I need to do properly. I think it will be quite difficult, but I believe we can be happier than we are now. For a slightly happier life in the future, we have no choice but to do our best now. As I was thinking that, Edward came back a day earlier than planned. That's never happened before, so I'm quite surprised. When I went to greet him, for some reason there was a woman holding a child next to Edward. Who is the woman next to you? I don't think we've met. I'm sorry if it's someone I've met before. I'm sorry for the sudden notice, but write up the divorce papers and leave. This is my new wife and child. We'll be living in this house together from now on, so you two live somewhere else. Edward looks incredibly satisfied. I think he's been waiting for this moment. But Margaret couldn't take it anymore and pointed out the problem to Edward. Dad, you don't know anything. You're the one who will regret saying that. This is happening because you keep treating Mom terribly. What on earth are you talking about? I don't understand what you're saying. Are you that bitter about being abandoned by me? I think you'll understand everything when you see this. It's not like I'm bitter about being abandoned by you, Dad. As long as I have Mom, I can live happily. What do you mean, when I see this? As Edward said that and peeked at Margaret's smartphone, his face instantly turned pale. He must have seen the contents of the messages Margaret showed him and couldn't hide his surprise. Those messages were the ones Edward had with the person he was cheating with, transferred to Margaret's smartphone. In other words, it's proof that we had realized he was cheating all along. If he was shown something like that, of course he wouldn't be able to hide his surprise. Why do you have those messages? When did you find those messages? Unfortunately, I noticed the cheating a little while ago. So I'm not surprised to be told you're cheating. If anything, I'm wondering why you're telling me now of all times. I know you have been cheating for 10 years. And I knew he had a child with the person he's cheating with too. I can't believe you do that behind our backs. Well, if you knew, I told you to pack your things, right? Get out of this house right now, and thanks for cleaning up. The child is still young, so I thought it'd be better if it was clean. You didn't show any consideration for us at all. But you're being so kind to your child with the person you cheated with. You've really changed. I don't care about that. Just get out already. I'm going to live a happy life in this house from now on. You're in the way, so disappear from my sight right now. Sorry, but you can't live in this house. I feel bad for the child, but it's your fault for cheating. What do you mean I can't live in this house? I won't stand for that. I will absolutely be happy in this house. Edward seems quite shaken, perhaps because he can't come to terms with the situation. He's probably in a rush because he thought everything would go according to his plan. I'm sure he bragged to the person he was cheating with that he had a house. It's true this is Edward's house, but it's not his property alone. So as long as he was cheating, we can't hand over this house. I have solid evidence of the cheating, so I've decided to get compensation. And you have no savings at all, so you can't pay, right? So instead, I've decided to take this house as compensation. No way! It makes no sense to bring a new person before divorcing. No matter how you look at it, you should have known it would turn out like this, right? Were you too selfish to realize it? I guess you're right. He seemed to have realized everything and collapsed to his knees. He probably thought everything would go his way because we always did what he said. In the end, I didn't hand the house over to Edward and took it as compensation. Apparently, he had really appealed to the fact that he had a house, and when he told the person he cheated with and their child that the house was gone, they ran away. I thought the person he cheated with was after money, but Edward says he had no idea. I didn't think he was such a pathetic person, so I'm despairing at my lack of judgment. That said, there's no point in saying that now, so I'm going to try to live positively from now on. And while Margaret and I were moving on, Edward suddenly showed up at the house. He hadn't contacted us at all, so I didn't know why he came, but I decided to deal with it anyway. We're already divorced, so why did you come here? I have nothing more to say to you, so please go somewhere else quickly. If you stay here any longer, I'll have to take appropriate action. You don't have to say such harsh things. We were originally husband and wife, so why don't we start over? I think that would make Margaret feel more at ease too. I don't think of you as a father anymore. Don't get involved in our lives anymore. I don't know anyone who would cheat and abandon their family. Why are you saying such cold things too, Margaret? I'm the only father in the world that Margaret has. I definitely think it would be more fun to live together as a family. If you really keep clinging to us any longer, I'll call the police. If you don't like that, then please disappear from our sight quickly. And never show yourself in front of us again. I see. I understand. It would be bad if the police were called, so I'll go home. With that, Edward went back to his own home. It seems that being abandoned by everyone has made him feel incredibly lonely all at once. From what I've heard from acquaintances, Edward is struggling quite a bit with paying compensation and child support, but I think it's his own fault. That said, I don't understand the nerve of him to betray us like that and then take such actions. I've decided to live happily with just Margaret and I from now on, so I've resolved not to compromise with him. It seems Margaret feels the same way as me and doesn't need a father. Hearing that truly puts me at ease. From now on, I want to live supporting each other, just two of us. Mom, it's terrible. We have to run away now or we'll be killed. What? What happened? When I asked for the reason, my daughter Kayla played me a recording from her smartphone. My wife and daughter will be killed. No, I mean, they're gone, so I'll pay back the insurance money right away. What came out of Kayla's smartphone was the voice of my husband, Daniel. Me and Kayla, gone? Could it be a prank by the two of them? No, wait, that's not it. Kayla looks too disturbed. This means Kayla accidentally heard Daniel starting to say he would take our lives. And he said he'd pay back right away, so he must be in debt. His irresponsible nature hasn't changed. I've known Daniel for over 20 years since we met in college. I've helped him out many times and always believed in him. But it was all just my one-sided affection. Otherwise, the thought of taking a life for money would never occur. I will never forgive such a man. My name is Melissa Williams. I'm a 42-year-old working housewife, employed at a travel agency. I met Daniel, who's the same age as me, during college in a camping club. That's why we still talk about this kind of stuff. Let's go camping sometime soon. What about work? I work for a camping gear manufacturer. Going camping is part of my job. Oh, right. What about you, Kayla? I smiled and looked back at Kayla. My high school daughter, Kayla, is recently obsessed with social media. Even now, she's fully engrossed in her smartphone. But Kayla is making an okay sign with her left hand. I got pregnant with Kayla when I was 25, which led to my marriage with Daniel. So, Kayla is a crucial part of our bond. The happiness we have now is all thanks to Kayla. I don't say it out loud, but I always think so. After all, Daniel and I started dating when we were college students. We hit it off in the same camping club, which led to our relationship. Daniel, as a boyfriend, was almost perfect. Being outdoorsy, he had a good physique and was reliable. His sense of fashion was also great. Most of all, I liked how kind he was to me and that he was a good listener. However, as a marriage partner, there was something that bothered me. That was his sense of money. Back then, Daniel often asked me this. Melissa, could you come over and cook? Could it be? When I asked, Daniel put his hands together. Then he would plead. Sorry, I'm broke. I have nothing to eat until my part-time job paycheck comes in. Figures. Daniel being broke was a usual occurrence, so being asked like this was common. Please, just until I get my paycheck next week. Make meals until then. I guess I have no choice. Is that okay? To Daniel's question, I nodded slightly. In fact, Daniel has no parents. He lost them in a fire at his house when he was in middle school. I wonder if Daniel doesn't get any money from home? I've thought this more than once or twice. But it's private, so I couldn't easily ask. Afterward, I bought groceries at the supermarket and visited Daniel's room. I've been waiting, Melissa. Come on in. Guided by Daniel, I entered the room. Then, instantly, something caught my eye. What's this? This? Cool, right? I bought it, Daniel said proudly. At his feet, there were camping cooking equipment, a sleeping bag, and a tent still in its box, all scattered around. You bought all of this? I spent all of last month's part-time job earnings on it. You're kidding, right? You said you bought stuff last time too. In my surprise, I ended up speaking in a stern tone. Then Daniel suddenly looked angry. What, you have complaints? No complaints, but this is clearly a waste. This is why you're always broke. I told him straight. But Daniel coldly said, It's my money, I can spend it how I want. But camping is my hobby. Don't interfere with this. Daniel yelled at me. It's always like this with Daniel. He spends recklessly and then eventually says he has no money. Then, he asks for help from me and others. Sometimes he even borrows money from me or others. Will this continue forever? Because of these worries, I couldn't consider Daniel as a marriage partner. As time went on, we graduated from college. I landed a job at a travel agency, and Daniel got a job at a camping gear manufacturer. However, with graduation and employment as turning points, I was considering breaking up with Daniel. Continuing the relationship as it was, marriage seemed difficult. It would be better for both of us to clearly part ways. That's what I thought, but as soon as he started working, Daniel changed completely. He worked seriously and didn't waste money at all. He didn't go out drinking with colleagues, nor did he wander around. We have to save for marriage, right? Are you really going to save? And not go into debt like before? Of course not. I promise. I was moved by Daniel's words. He was different from the irresponsible Daniel of our student days. Maybe marrying him wouldn't be so bad. I continued dating Daniel. Eventually, at the age of 25, I got pregnant with Kayla. We finally became husband and wife. In the early days of our marriage, Daniel helped with child-rearing and household chores. So, I truly thought he was a good father. But that life didn't last long. Soon after giving birth, I returned to work. When we started leaving Kayla at a childcare center, Daniel's attitude changed significantly. Daniel, help me clean the room. No way. I have to go out. Can't you help a little? You hardly ever help with the chores anymore. I handed the vacuum cleaner to Daniel. But Daniel didn't take it. Instead, he turned away and said, Housework and child-rearing are the wife's job. You do it. What's that supposed to mean? You used to help. I couldn't help but yell. Then Daniel frowned and muttered, That was because Kayla was little. Now, it doesn't take that much effort, and you can manage on your own. That's not true. Enough. I have things to do now. With that, Daniel left on his own. What's with him, really? Most men push housework onto their wives. I understood that well. But being in that position myself made the words weigh differently. At least he's still working, maybe that's good enough. I muttered as I started cleaning. I threw away the insurance flyers Daniel had been looking at into the trash. He even left someone's business card out. He's really messy. I didn't want to be blamed if Daniel lost that business card. So, I took a photo of the business card with my smartphone before placing it on the table. As I continued cleaning, I suddenly realized something odd. Wait. Where's my jewelry? My favorite piece of jewelry was missing. Did I leave it somewhere? No, I'm sure I put it in its case. I searched the room while cleaning, but it was nowhere to be found. Hours went by, and when Daniel came home in the evening, I asked him, Daniel, have you seen my jewelry? I don't know. You didn't sell it, did you? Daniel looked flustered when I asked, but he quickly denied it. Of course not. Yeah, right. The possibility of Daniel having sold it existed, but there was no proof. Despite my suspicions, I couldn't press him any further. Despite such misunderstandings and small troubles, we were living happily. Over time, Kayla grew up and became a high school student. With less to worry about, I focused on my job. I was leading a fulfilling life. Then one day, Daniel, who had returned from work, asked me, "Melissa, are you insured?" "I am insured, yes." "Good, then." I felt uneasy about Daniel's odd behavior. When I sat in front of Daniel, he handed me a pamphlet. He started talking fluently as he showed it to me. "A housing complex is being built in the next town." "A housing complex?" "A place with built houses for sale. Houses all lined up and—" Daniel showed me photos on his smartphone. "I see," I thought. Then Daniel said something unexpected. "I actually want to buy a new house there. That's why I asked about the insurance." When buying a house and taking out a loan, it's common to join a group credit life insurance. "That's all he was asking about," Daniel said. "Buying a house? Are you sure it's okay?" "Of course. It might trouble you, but it's no trouble at all. I'll work hard too, so let's buy one." I thought owning a home was a dream far beyond reach. But it was becoming a reality. I was overjoyed, feeling like I was on top of the world. After some time, on a particular Sunday, we, as a family of 3, headed to sign the contract. It was about a 30-minute drive from our current condominium. Upon arrival, among the lined-up built homes, there was a prefab office. "Nice to meet you, I'm Jason Garcia, your agent." Perhaps because Daniel had talked to him beforehand, the home builder agent, Jason, quickly appeared. We were shown around the model house under Jason's guidance. While we were each looking around the house, Kayla came running from somewhere. "Mom, come here." Kayla forcefully took me to the prefab office. Once inside, Kayla closed the door. "What's wrong, Kayla?" "Mom, it's terrible. We have to run away now or we'll be killed." "What? What happened?" When I asked for the reason, Kayla played me a recording from her smartphone. "My wife and daughter will be killed. No, I mean, they're gone, so I'll pay back the insurance money right away." "It's okay, I'll pay it right away." The voice coming from Kayla's smartphone was Daniel's. Moreover, he sounded terribly panicked. Me and Kayla, gone? Before that, he almost said kill. Could it be a prank by the two of them? No, wait, that's not it. Kayla looks too disturbed. This means Kayla accidentally heard Daniel starting to say he would take our lives. And he said he'd pay back right away, so he must be in debt. His irresponsible nature hasn't changed. I've known Daniel for over 20 years since we met in college. I've helped him out many times and always believed in him. I thought we had been supporting each other since we got married. But it was all just my one-sided affection. Otherwise, the thought of taking a life for money would never occur. That man. I'll never forgive him. Confused still, I asked Kayla. "Kayla, how did you get this?" "Dad was talking on the phone outside, so we wouldn't hear," said Kayla, with a pale face, trembling. I hugged Kayla. "Dad almost said kill. That means to kill, right?" "It's okay, Kayla. I'll take care of it." Right then, the entrance door suddenly opened. Kayla and I were startled. Sorry. I was in a hurry." It was Jason who entered. Peering outside, Jason locked the office door. Then he whispered to us, "Escape now without Daniel finding you. He was talking about something terrible." "Something terrible?" "Yes, about you too." The agent struggled to find words. It seemed he heard the same thing as Kayla. "Well, my daughter heard that conversation too." When I mentioned this, Jason looked shocked. "Then it's clear." Daniel is being held back by my colleague, so leave through the back now. Okay. I really want to confront Daniel now. But Kayla is too frightened. I can't leave Kayla alone and go to Daniel. Let's go to my parents' house for now. Exiting through the back, Kayla and I jumped into a taxi. We headed to my parents' house. Arriving at my parents' house in about an hour, I briefly explained the situation and left Kayla with them. Then I headed to a nearby law firm. On the way, my smartphone rang. It was Daniel. I hesitated but answered the phone. Hello? Melissa? Where are you? I was worried, you suddenly disappeared. Is Kayla with you? Yes. Kayla is with me, so don't worry. Hearing this, I could hear Daniel sigh. I was worried. What happened all of a sudden? Actually, I lied that my father, Brian, had collapsed. I thought that would serve as an excuse for suddenly disappearing. Daniel seemed to believe that. But he continued. So, when are you coming back? I have things to plan over here. It sounded like he had plans to take our lives. Sorry, it might take a while. What do you mean by that? Are you going to leave me hanging? Daniel suddenly yelled, clearly irritated. That confirmed my suspicions that his words were serious. Sorry, but I don't plan to come back. What? You don't help with housework, and you raise your voice when you get angry like earlier. I hate that. I stated plainly. Daniel lost his words for a moment. But he quickly retorted. I shouldn't have yelled. It was bad timing when Brian collapsed and you were feeling insecure. It's too late to apologize now. Let's take this chance to put some distance between us. Bringing up divorce might make him suspicious, so I reluctantly said that. Then Daniel became visibly upset. You're hiding something, aren't you? We were just talking about buying a house. Yes, but it's an affair, isn't it? You got a call from your lover and suddenly want a divorce from me. Daniel's roar echoed. Being accused of such awful things, I completely shrank back. After Daniel vented his complaints, I quietly announced, that's another thing I hate. I'll consider divorce and consult a lawyer. Wait a minute. What about buying a house? I don't care. Don't contact me for a while. I ended the call unilaterally. Immediately, I started to tremble. This was the first time I felt fear towards Daniel. Even in arguments, I had never felt this much fear. This won't do. I have to leave. I resolved to get a divorce. Afterwards, I informed my company I would be taking some time off. Then I consulted a lawyer about the divorce. I also decided to submit the recording to the police and have them investigate Daniel's debts. While discussing, I remembered something. Speaking of which, that business card. A business card I found while cleaning a little while ago. Thinking back, the company name was Finance. Clearly a financial-related business card, but not a well-known consumer finance company. Could it be a malicious lender? Feeling uneasy, I showed it to the lawyer. Sure enough, it was suspected to be from a malicious lender. In essence, here's the situation. Daniel borrowed money from some malicious lender. Unable to repay, he was pressed for payment. That's why he aimed for our insurance money. After having the lawyer delve deeper, it became clear that Daniel had debts from various sources. Not just consumer finance companies, but also colleagues and malicious lenders. The cause was gambling. Unbeknownst to me, Daniel had apparently been addicted to gambling since our college days. All I could do was sigh. However, I couldn't just leave things as they were. I have to divorce him before it affects Kayla. I resolved to tell him it's over. It's been a week since I fled from Daniel. He hasn't contacted me, but I never know when he might show up. I need to find out what Daniel is up to. I called Daniel's company, but not to speak to Daniel. I had asked for Kent Martinez, a male colleague of Daniel's. Kent Martinez speaking. Who is this? Kent asked with a puzzled voice. I decided to introduce myself boldly. I'm Melissa, Daniel Williams's wife. Oh, Daniel's wife. Yes, Daniel is here. I'll transfer you. Please wait. Don't transfer me to Daniel, I blurted out loudly. Kent fell silent for a moment. Then he hesitantly said, Is there something wrong? I explained the situation to Kent. I was confident Kent would believe me, because Kent too had lent a large sum of money to Daniel. Moreover, Daniel hadn't paid him back, or so he had told his subordinate. I had heard about it from the lawyer. And that's the situation. Really? Daniel did something that serious? Kent sounded incredulous. But I confirmed it was true. Then, I made a request of Kent. Could you please keep an eye on Daniel for me? Me? Watch Daniel? Yes, just contact me if anything happens. I pleaded earnestly. Kent seemed hesitant at first, but, influenced by my earnestness, agreed to my request in the end. All right, I'll do it. I thanked him once more before ending the call. Now I have to be clear with Daniel. My anxiety grew. What if Daniel became enraged? How could I protect Kayla if Daniel attempted to harm us? These thoughts raced through my mind. Yet, I was doing everything I could. I had consulted the police through the lawyer. And now I had an ally in Kent who would watch Daniel. It'll be okay. I'll make sure of it. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Several hours later, as the day turned to evening, Daniel called. Melissa, have you calmed down? Come back. I'm waiting for you, Daniel said in a gentle voice. But something lurking behind his kindness troubled me. Was it sincere? Or was he trying to lure me back to kill us? Bad thoughts flooded my mind, leaving me unable to respond. Amidst the prolonged silence, Daniel, unable to bear it any longer, shouted, Enough with your selfishness. I'm tired from work and housework. That's because. Don't mess with me. How dare you take advantage of my kindness? Startled by Daniel's shouting, I realized it was hopeless with him. In that moment, my thoughts spilled out as words. We're getting a divorce. If you're going to divorce me over some trivial reason, you'll have to pay compensation. Daniel yelled at me. Instinctively, I retorted. It's not trivial. It's because of the gambling debts you've accumulated. That's why I'm divorcing you. Daniel fell silent at those words. Perhaps because it was true, he had nothing to say. Taking a deep breath, I continued. You have gambling debts, don't you, Daniel? Tell me the truth. That's not it. What's not it? You promised you wouldn't get into debt, remember? A verbal promise before we got married. Daniel seemed to recall it too, and said no more. I'm divorcing you because you broke your promise. You'll hear from my lawyer, so sign the divorce papers. All right, but I won't pay any compensation. It's not about cheating or anything. I'm not expecting any compensation because of the debt. Just stay out of our lives from now on. I'll change everything, the beneficiary of the insurance, and make sure we have nothing to do with each other. I said this and hung up without waiting for Daniel's response. It was over. I sighed deeply, still holding my smartphone. But the next day, everything changed. After dinner, as I was relaxing with Kayla, my smartphone rang unexpectedly. An unknown number. I wonder who it is. I answered the phone, puzzled, and heard an unfamiliar man's voice from the other end. Hello. Is this Melissa Williams? I'm Officer Andrew Miller with the police. Police? The officer explained that because I had consulted the police about Daniel, they had increased patrols in the area. And just a short while ago, they had apprehended a suspicious man in front of my parents' house. Moreover, the man was carrying gasoline, intending to set my house on fire. And we extinguished the fire right away. However, the person claims to be your husband. My husband! Daniel! The police were holding Daniel, the suspicious man. I couldn't hide my shock. So, we rang the doorbell, but it seems you were out, so we contacted you by phone. Where are you now? I'm currently staying at a hotel with my family. Actually, I had heard some information. I explained the situation to the officer. The story goes back a few hours, when I was preparing dinner at my parents' house. I received a call from Kent on my smartphone. Melissa? You and your family should get away immediately. What happened? Daniel had brought a portable gasoline can used for camping. He said it was for work, but when I secretly checked, it was filled with gasoline. He might be planning to set the house on fire. That's what Kent said. So, I took Kayla and my parents and evacuated to a nearby hotel. At the same time, I had informed both the lawyer and the police about the situation. And while telling this story, I headed to the scene. Upon arriving in front of my parents' house, there were many police officers present. Moreover, Daniel was being restrained. Melissa! Explain this to me! Daniel's voice was almost a shout. But I ignored him and approached the police officer named Andrew who had called me. Is this your husband for sure? Yes, but there's no mistake that he's also a criminal. As I said that, Daniel shouted. Stop it! It's a misunderstanding, tell them. Why should I? Why? Because it's obvious. Why would I hurt my own wife and daughter? Daniel said this without a hint of remorse. In that moment, unable to contain my anger, I played the recording. Upon hearing it, Daniel collapsed to the ground. You wanted the insurance money, right? Well, you won't be getting any. Reflect on your actions behind bars. Wait, please. Shut up. Now you'll live in fear. Daniel looked puzzled at my words. I decided to explain further. You wanted to pay back the people who lent you money for your debts with our family's insurance money, right? I'm sure they'll come to collect even if you're behind bars. No way! No! Daniel began to struggle. Soon, police officers restrained him and took him away. Later, Daniel was charged with arson among other crimes and received a guilty verdict. He is appealing, so the verdict is not yet final. According to my lawyer, the malicious lenders who were demanding repayment from Daniel backed off, likely wanting to avoid police involvement after his arrest. Also, the amount Daniel had borrowed turned out to be less than expected. Either way, we were assured we would not be harmed. The lawyer made that clear. By the way, Daniel and I divorced shortly after his arrest. While I can't expect any compensation, the risk of Daniel trying to take my life is gone. Thanks to that, Kayla and I can live in peace. I also thanked Kent later for his help. It turns out Kent is single and likes outdoor activities, and we got a bit closer. We have a good relationship now. Maybe it could become something more once Kayla is independent. But that's a story for later. After all, the happiness we have now is all thanks to Kayla. I'm thinking of expressing my gratitude to Kayla for the first time. Wait, are you trying to use the bathroom? Dirty old people are banned from using it. We use that toilet too, you know. If you guys use it, our brand new toilet will get dirty immediately, won't it? Sorry, but you'll have to make do with peeing in the bushes outside. Oh, and don't do it in the garden, okay? If you dirty our precious home even a little, I'll never forgive you. Both we were taken aback by Emily and Wilson's words. A bathroom ban? That's just unthinkable. No matter how much they dislike us, such behavior is inexcusable. We have endured harsh words from our son and his wife before. As we're the kind of people who dislike fights, we've always quietly accepted their treatment. But now, we've reached our limit. We need to make it clear what happens when they make enemies of us. I started plotting a scenario for revenge. I'm sure this plan will work. My name is Sarah, a 62-year-old homemaker. I live with my husband. I met Johnson, my husband, at the company where we used to work. After Johnson's persistent pursuit, we started dating and smoothly transitioned into marriage. I was blessed with a son with Johnson. A lively boy. We named him Wilson and raised him with care. Wilson grew up healthily and eventually found a job. He married a woman named Emily and built a family. I remember the feeling genuinely happy when he first introduced Emily to us. But that happiness didn't last long. Everything went awry when I realized why she had married him. After marriage, they lived with us. One day, Wilson and Johnson were out, and only Emily and I were at home. At first, we were chatting amicably in the living room, but then Emily's mobile phone rang. It seemed she received a call. Sorry, Sarah, it looks like it's from a friend. With that, she excused herself and went back to her room. Left alone in the living room, I decided to clean the house to pass the time. As I was passing Emily's room, I inadvertently overheard her conversation. Her voice was so loud that I couldn't help but hear. Seriously, those old folks are living too long. If they suddenly died, we could get the inheritance. I'm married into the family for the president's fortune, but this is just hell. Her words felt like a cold shower to me. Actually, Johnson's father was the president of well-known top-tier company. However, the company was set to be inherited by his brother. Still, being part of the president's family, Johnson had some share of the wealth. It turned out Emily had married Wilson with that very intention in mind. They probably believed that once we passed away, the inheritance would become theirs. In fact, we had always treated Wilson and his wife with this in mind. Such behavior couldn't be tolerated. I shared this with Johnson that night. Initially, he was shocked, saying, "Really?" but he trusted my words. After discussing, we decided not to act immediately but to observe if Emily would reveal her true intentions. Maybe, in the meantime, she might change her attitude and start treating us like a real family. It was a decision made with the faint hope. But things didn't go as expected. To test Wilson and his wife, we observed their behavior. We invited them out, asked for help with chores, and so on. Gradually, they seemed to find us a nuisance, and their attitude changed. "Wilson, you're free now, right? I'm sorry to ask you, but can you give me a hand to do the laundry? My back hurts." One day, seeing Wilson relaxing in the living room, I asked him. Although Emily had been the one to speak harshly that day, Johnson suspected they might be in this together. We suspect that maybe Wilson feels in the same way. So, I started to approach Wilson to understand his feelings. At my request, Wilson looked up from his mobile phone, sighed with annoyance, and said, "Can't you do that yourself, Mom? You're a mother, after all. Shouldn't you be able to handle the household chores by yourself?" He then returned his gaze to his mobile phone. It became clear that he had no intention of helping. His attitude seemed to say, "I have no intention of being a family with you." This thought sent a chill down my spine. Don't say that. Family should help each other when in trouble. You have your own family now, Wilson. You need to act responsibly. My voice trembled, reflecting my fear. If my suspicions were true, it meant that even Wilson, whom we had lovingly raised, was betraying us. That was something I couldn't bear. Desperately, I pleaded. Please help me. But Wilson didn't even look up from his phone or show any sign of getting up from the sofa. His unwillingness to help was evident. Persisting in my request, he let out a heavy sigh and continued. Look. He continued. Enough is enough. Yes, you're my mother, but that doesn't give you the right to be selfish. I have a wife, Emily, and I need to work for her. I'm already exhausted every day, and now you're asking me to do chores too? That's cruel. Don't ask us to do such things anymore. We are essentially strangers. Essentially strangers. Those words pierced deeply into my heart. It confirmed my fears. Both Wilson and Emily seem to be after Johnson's inheritance. They seem indifferent to us, thinking as long as they receive the inheritance, that's all that matters. This betrayal from family deeply wounded me. Yet, we couldn't foresee something even worse. I immediately told Johnson about Wilson's possible intent for the inheritance. Johnson, seemingly already convinced. I thought as much. He nodded. And so, our family dynamics became distorted. Amidst all this, Wilson and his wife decided to move out. When they brought it up, we couldn't help but feel relieved. By then, living with them had become unbearable. Even sharing the same house with them was distressing. They wanted to live in a new single-family home, which would require a significant amount of money. To hasten their move, we decided to provide financial assistance. Dad, Mom, thanks. Family is indeed valuable. Knowing the underlying meaning of Wilson's words, we couldn't genuinely rejoice. The construction of their new house was completed, and it was the day of their move. They packed up some of their belongings and left the house. A week later, we visited their new home with a housewarming gift. Though I didn't want to go, I remembered my father-in-law teaching about maintaining certain courtesies, so I decided to endure it a bit. Nice house, isn't it? Smells like new construction. Their home was more beautiful than expected, probably due to the money spent on it. After being shown around various rooms, when we gave the celebration gift in the living room. Thank you so much, she said. She seemed pleased as she put away the gift. While chatting in the living room, I felt the need to use the restroom. Where's the bathroom? May I use it? I said. To my request, Wilson and his wife responded unbelievably. Wait, are you trying to use the bathroom? Dirty old people are banned from using it. We use that toilet too, you know. If you use it, our brand new toilet will get dirty immediately, won't it? Followed by his words. Sorry, but you'll have to make do with peeing in the bushes outside. Oh, and don't do it in the garden, okay? If you dirty our precious home even a little, I'll never forgive you. Their words made me feel dizzy. It was too cruel, regardless of how much they disliked us. At that moment, they were like strangers to me. There was no familial affection left. That's why I decided to start my revenge. I planned to ruin them thoroughly. I secretly devised a scenario for it. Exchanging glances with Johnson, who was just as stunned. It seemed Johnson was thinking the same as me. We don't want to be a nuisance, and since we've given the housewarming gift, maybe we should leave if we're not wanted. There was no reason to stay in their house any longer. We had fulfilled our duty by giving a housewarming gift. If they were going to be that terrible to us, we didn't need to stay. Right. Our presence here only seems to bother them. It's better to leave now. I had anticipated being unwelcome, but to be told things like being banned from using the toilet or to go in the bushes was too much. Yeah, leave right now. Don't want this house getting old and musty because of some old people. Don't stay any longer than necessary. Old people making the house musty? That's just absurd. Realizing how much my own son despised us was a bit of a shock. But I couldn't see Wilson as my son anymore. I'd deal with these conflicting feelings later. For now, the priority was to leave. And don't come over unless absolutely necessary. We've got your gift, so you're of no use to us now. Maybe see you at the baby shower, but that's it. Even though she demanded us to leave right away, she still wants a gift. What greedy people. Though giving them gifts was burdensome, we were fortunately not short on money. So, to keep the peace and calm myself, I accepted it. Then let's sever ties. If you despise us so much, it must be hard to continue as a family, right? Anything is fine with me as long as we don't have to deal with you and your family, who are troublesome. Are they high on their own anger? Emily quickly agreed to my suggestion, likely not understanding the consequences of her decision. We gathered our things and left Wilson's house. They hardly even saw us out. But this was just the beginning of our revenge. I couldn't wait to see them fall into the hell we were about to create. I can't help but look forward to that moment. Back home, I shared the revenge plan with Johnson. He said, "This is going to be interesting." He laughed and was in agreement with my plan. They say spouses become like mirrors of each other, and I really felt that was true. Since then, we had been very busy. To complete our revenge, various preparations were necessary. Before we knew it, about a week had passed. Despite being busy, we were leading a calm life without any major incidents with Wilson and his wife. But it seemed about time for a disruption. As I was expecting this, the phone rang. Johnson and I exchanged glances. Sure enough, it was Wilson on the line. I put the call on speaker so Johnson could hear and spoke to Wilson. "Hello, Wilson? What's up? Did something happen?" It was surprising he called so nonchalantly after what had happened. Normally, after such an incident, I'd think it would be awkward to make a phone call. But Wilson, sounding cornered and desperate, blurted out. "What's happened, you ask? What have you two done? Thanks to you, I'm in a terrible situation. Do something about it now." Wilson's statement was disjointed, and I couldn't understand what he was talking about. Of course, I had orchestrated this revenge, so I could guess what might be happening to him. "What exactly do you mean? Tell me everything from the start, I don't understand." Since I had no idea what he was accusing us of, I couldn't respond. Urging Wilson to explain, he started his story in an angry tone. It seemed the trouble started when he went to work after the incident. While working, Wilson noticed something unusual. The looks directed at him by his colleagues were unusually cold. Wilson, who tends to be overly concerned with others' perceptions, found it unbearable to stay at work and left early that day. Hoping it was just his imagination, he went to work again the next day, but the cold stares remained unchanged. He confronted a colleague about it, but all he got in response was, "Ask yourself." Just that, and they wouldn't tell me anything more. Furthermore, it wasn't just his department colleagues who were giving him cold stares. It seemed as if everyone in the company, from high-ranking superiors to colleagues in other departments, were looking at him with disdain. He felt as if every employee he encountered was regarding him with contempt. Despite racking his brain, Wilson couldn't think of a reason for the cold treatment at work. He hadn't made any mistakes on the job. Eventually, he surmised that my husband, Johnson, a member of the company's founding family, and I must have been involved. "What have you two done? Because of you, I can't work anymore. You need to take responsibility." Wilson lashed out at us one-sidedly. Indeed, the frigid reception he faced wasn't a figment of his imagination, it was a part of our scheme. We had promptly informed my brother-in-law about the ordeal with Wilson and his wife. He values us greatly and was furious upon hearing it. Unfortunately, my brother-in-law isn't one to keep secrets. He inadvertently leaked our story to his secretary and other managerial staff. Soon enough, the entire company knew about their misdeeds, and everyone began to scorn Wilson. "This is too much. Fix it now. I can't work in that kind of environment." Indeed, someone like him, who is easily swayed by others' opinions, couldn't possibly continue working in such a hostile environment. However, his employment was actually a result of nepotism. He had been lazy during his student days, lacking notable educational achievements or qualifications. Since he couldn't find a satisfactory job, his sympathetic uncle hired him at his company. Could someone like Wilson really manage a proper job search? From my perspective, it seemed unlikely. That company was his only option. Yet, working there under current circumstances was impossible for him. "Please, you have to do something. I can't work under those stairs. You caused this, right? Then fix it," he yelled over the phone. But I had no intention of forgiving him. "We've disowned you, remember? Why are you asking for help now?" "That was all Emily's doing. I always considered you and Dad as my family. Families are supposed to help each other, right? So, help me." Indeed, families should help each other. But he had misunderstood the meaning of family. You help because they are your family, not treat them as family only when help is needed. Feeling the conversation was pointless, I ended the call with him. Afterward, my phone kept ringing incessantly, so I blocked his number. That was how we completely severed ties with our own son. Our revenge was far from over. The day after our conversation with Wilson, my phone rang again. This time, it was Emily. "Sarah, please open the entrance. I have something to discuss, including about Wilson. Let me in quickly." As soon as I answered the phone, she blurted out such things. It seemed that she, thinking it best to resolve matters directly, was waiting at the entrance of our house, eager to talk. Well, it was our former house, after all. "Emily, we're not at that house anymore." Indeed, it was our former home. Since then, we had sold the house where we lived with them and moved to a new home. A brand new, sparkling single-family home. Our new home, chosen with a slightly competitive spirit, was more spacious and grander than Wilson and Emily's. "What? Then where are you? Things are terrible here. If we don't know where you are, how can we receive the inheritance? Tell me your current address." She seemingly failed to comprehend the meaning of disownment. To disown means no longer being family, and inheritance is not passed to non-family members. We had even updated our will to ensure that, come what may, Wilson and his wife would not receive any inheritance. However, she appeared to misunderstand, thinking that if some family connection remained, they could still inherit. "Emily, you can no longer receive any inheritance. We've disowned you, remember? We're no longer family. Why would we give an inheritance to someone who's not family?" I was astonished at her lack of understanding. Her ignorance was so profound that it was almost laughable. Surprised by my response, she exclaimed. "What?" she exclaimed in a loud voice. "What? I didn't know that. That's a real problem if we can't get the inheritance. Let's forget about the disownment, okay? We're still family, right?" Her self-centeredness was astounding. It was baffling how someone could be so obsessed with money. Her illogical and selfish statements left me speechless. Misinterpreting my silence as agreement, she continued. "How about we live together? You've moved out of this house, right? I just realized how lonely it is without you, Sarah. Our house is big, so you can live here too. Let's live together as a family." And yet, this was the same person who had once called us dirty old people and drove us out. Now she was even suggesting living together, clearly all for the sake of inheritance. It was obvious that restarting life with them was out of the question. I wondered if she even understood that. Could she really not understand even that? "Sorry, but we'll have to decline. And from now on, please don't contact us. We've disowned you, so we're no longer family. And non-family members won't inherit anything. Please understand and give up." "No! That's unacceptable! Please, Sarah, forgive us!" When I firmly declared our disownment, Emily seemed to finally grasp its meaning and desperately clung to any hope. But my decision was final. And likely Johnson's as well. Therefore, I ended the call with her and immediately blocked her number. This way, she couldn't contact us again. They wouldn't know our current whereabouts. Essentially, we've completed our disownment. We felt a sense of relief, having cleanly severed this unpleasant connection. Later, I heard from acquaintances and brother-in-law that Wilson and Emily began fighting incessantly over the inheritance and their jobs, leading to a divorce. They argued bitterly over alimony and property division, even hiring lawyers and taking their disputes to court. After the divorce was finalized, Emily returned to her parents' home. She seemed certain that her biological parents would accept her, but when they actually saw her and learned of the situation, they were furious. Apparently, she was promptly kicked out of the house. Wilson, having quit his job, struggled to find new employment and is now working tirelessly in part-time roles to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Johnson and I are enjoying a peaceful and happy life. The weight of the Wilson affair lifted, we've found newfound freedom. We're planning to go on a trip soon, taking brother-in-law and his wife along. Johnson and I have been making plans for this trip together. It's our way of thanking him for his help in our revenge. We are carefully planning this vacation. Family is about supporting each other and helping in times of need. But that doesn't always mean being related by blood. Some, like Wilson and Emily, disregard even their own family. This incident has deeply ingrained that lesson in us. Thank you for always taking care of my husband. I wrote this with a bright red permanent marker on the back of my husband who was passed out drunk. He wouldn't think that I knew about his daily affairs with younger women, under the guise of working late. But I knew everything. Suppressing the rage that made me want to claw at him, I left that message. It was a declaration of war to my husband's mistress. My husband, Darren, and I, Anita, both 38, got married 3 years ago. Both working, I mostly handle the housework since I work from home. We don't have kids, but I thought we were happily living together, a thought only I seemed to have. I'll be working late tomorrow too. Don't wait up for dinner, go to sleep first. Darren, who started working late suddenly about 3 months ago. The frequency increased over time, and he started spending nights at the office twice a week. You've been working late a lot recently. You never used to. The economy's better, and we're busier. That's good, right? Yes, take care. I believed Darren's words and saw him off. But not only did Darren come home late, his attitude towards me grew colder. He used to invite me out on his days off, but now he barely spoke to me. How about we go out today? It's nice weather. I'm tired, maybe some other time. Then, let's watch a movie at home together. Not in the mood. I want some alone time, go away. Darren, barely lifting his face from his mobile phone, spoke with annoyance. On bad days, except for bathroom and meal times, he wouldn't leave his room all day. Is this all just stress from work? I was worried about Darren's changed behavior, but one day, my concern turned to suspicion. That day, Darren came home at 1 a.m., and I was still awake due to work. Anita, you're still up? I was working. Huh? The moment I took Darren's suit, I smelled an unfamiliar scent. Why does your suit smell like perfume? When I asked, Darren's face stiffened slightly as he sniffed his clothes. Then, he looked annoyed. I don't smell anything. You have hay fever, so you wouldn't notice. Yeah. Maybe it's from a female coworker who wears too much perfume. Must have rubbed off. You notice the perfume despite your severe hay fever? Well, yeah. She wears a lot. Darren's words sounded like a hasty, thoughtless excuse. Were you that close to her to smell it so strongly? I helped her when she almost fell. Darren licked his lips while saying this. A habit he had when lying. Really? You're not hiding anything from me? Stop nagging. Don't snoop around like a controlling woman. When I pressed him, Darren glared and stormed out of the living room. Is he really cheating? The next day, Darren left for work without breakfast and didn't return until after 9 p.m., ignoring all calls and messages from me. He only came back after midnight. Welcome home. I was worried. You didn't say you'd be working late today. I was swamped with work. I tried to contact you several times. At least reply to my messages. I told you I was busy. I'm going to sleep. Darren hastily retreated to the bedroom and slammed the door shut. Lately, even when going to bed, he turns his back to me, avoiding any contact. I just want to have a calm conversation. I approached the bedroom door and was about to knock. But then, I heard voices from inside and stopped. I just got home. I want to see you again, even though we just met. I want to see you too. When can you come next? Maybe I'll try to make it tomorrow too. I love you. Listening closely, I realized Darren was on a speakerphone call with a woman. He barely talks to me. Unable to hold back, I knocked and tried to listen through the door. Who are you calling at this hour? Why hide it? What are you doing, Anita? Angered, Darren swung the door open forcefully, knocking me down as I stood close by. It hurts. What are you doing? Anita, how dare you eavesdrop on my call? What a nerve! I was just curious who you were talking to at this time. I was discussing work with a colleague. But it didn't sound like that. Shut up. Always saying presumptuous things. I'll show you. Darren roughly picked me up and threw me outside the front door. Then he quickly shut the door and locked it. What are you doing? Open the door. Annoying woman in the house is just a nuisance. Stay quiet out there. This is too much, no matter what. It's your fault. Reflect on it spending the night on the ground. With those words, Darren's footsteps faded away into the house. Thrown out empty-handed, I couldn't even contact the apartment management. I had no choice but to spend the night at the entrance. The next morning, Darren came out before going to work and tossed the keys at me roughly. Did you reflect? If you learned your lesson, don't ever meddle again. After saying only what he wanted, Darren left for work without hearing my side. To be treated this badly. I can't stay silent. I'll gather evidence. A few days later, I decided to stake out his office as he claimed to be working late. Exiting the office at the regular time, Darren walked in the opposite direction of our home. Where is he going? Following him, he met up with a young, cute woman. I was shocked to see them walk arm in arm, boldly. I filmed them with my mobile phone as they entered a high-end French restaurant. When he dines with me, it's always at a family restaurant. The difference in treatment was both sad and frustrating. Suppressing my swirling emotions, I continued to watch. After their meal, they headed straight to a hotel. Now I have perfect evidence. I followed Darren several more times, gathering more evidence. It turned out, on days he said he was working late, he spent hours in a hotel, and nights he claimed to be staying over at work, he was at his mistress's house. I'll be at the office all night working tomorrow. Every day must be really tough. I bought some good wine today, how about we relax a bit? Since being thrown outside, I've been compliant, which seemed to please Darren, who happily agreed to a drink in the evening. Then he guzzled down the expensive wine and quickly got drunk. Thank you for always taking care of my husband. It's perfect. I wrote this message with bright red pen on Darren's back, partly as a declaration of war to his mistress. It seemed to have an effect because around 11 p.m. the next night, I received a call from Darren, who never initiates contact. Did he realize? Is this about the mistress? Wondering if it was Darren or his mistress. I nervously pressed the call button on my mobile phone. I'm so sorry. A woman's voice. I didn't recognize whose voice it was. So loud it crackled through the phone, making me pull it away from my ear. What? I'm really sorry. The mistress sounded panicked, not like she was making a hasty apology. I was surprised. This was not what I had expected. You didn't know about him? Yes. I wouldn't have been with him if I knew he was married. That's unfortunate. Her name is Lorna. A 28-year-old receptionist at Darren's client company. Deceiving a woman like this is the worst. I'm in shock. He even proposed to me. What? We were planning our wedding, looking at venues. I was so excited until I found the message in the shower room. She scrubbed off the message with a body brush as she would wash his back, pretending to feel sick, and went to bed early. I panicked thinking I couldn't marry him. After he slept, I checked his phone and saw your messages, realizing you were his wife. I didn't think you were unaware. I'm sorry for scaring you. No, I should apologize for what I did, even unknowingly. No need to apologize. You were promised marriage, you're a victim too. Betrayed by Darren, and to think he deceived such a genuine girl. I've never felt so disgusted with someone. In my heart, I decided to end my relationship with Darren. I'm going to divorce him. You should break up with him too. I want to, but I transferred about $10,000 to his account for our wedding expenses. Really? If our marriage was a lie, where's that money? Maybe he really planned to marry you? I don't want to marry such a terrible person. I want to get my money back and cut ties. That's better. But let's make him truly reflect on his actions. I couldn't let this go unchallenged. Thinking of a plan, I came up with an idea. Can you help me with something? Anything. Actually, I have a secret I haven't told Darren. She was obviously angry and shared a secret she kept from Darren. Thus, we joined forces to teach Darren a lesson. We secretly communicated and meticulously prepared. Over the next 2 weeks, the day of our retaliation arrived finally. I'll be working late again today. Might even stay overnight. You're always working hard. Take care not to overdo it. I smiled and saw Darren off, then contacted Lorna and went to her place to wait. Then, around 6 p.m., the doorbell of her house rang. I'm home. Work was exhausting today. Welcome back, Darren. Huh? When I appeared from the living room, Darren jumped as if he had seen a ghost. Dinner? Bath? Or divorce? Smiling, I thrust the divorce papers at him, making Darren drop his bag in panic. Anita, why are you here? Let's sit down and talk about it. Come, let's go to the living room. What are you plotting? You didn't do anything to Lorna, did you? Just come quickly. Okay. Seemingly shocked by my loud voice since I was a compliant recently, Darren hurried into the living room. There, Lorna sat on the sofa with a broad smile. Lorna, what is this all about? That's our line. How could you promise marriage to me when you have a wife? Well, let's hear the full story, shall we? I sat next to Lorna and Darren sat in front of us. I began interrogating Darren. He finally seemed to give in. Lorna was just a bit of fun. I was interested in younger girls. Gross. You're attractive too. But you know, eating the same thing every time gets boring, right? Sometimes you want to try something different. I'm disgusted. And why were you cold to me if that's the case? That's because I thought if I was cold to you, you'd be more devoted. I was too stunned by his reasoning to speak. Taking my place, Lorna glared at Darren. If you weren't serious about me, why did you promise to marry me? I thought marriage meant you'd give me money. Give me back my money. That's impossible. I've already spent it all. Are you kidding? What did you spend it on? I treated colleagues to slightly expensive lunches to be liked at work. And what else? I bought expensive coats and shoes to impress clients. To think you spent my savings on such things. I'll never forgive you. Lorna muttered in a low voice. I'll have you arrested for marriage fraud. What? Isn't that an overreaction for something like this? Additionally, I'm demanding $30,000 in compensation and $10,000 for the savings you spent. Wait a minute. This is too harsh. Darren's face turned pale with panic. Watching him, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. Anita, say something. Just accept the arrest quietly. I meant to Lorna. If your husband gets arrested, it'll be trouble, right? not at all. I'm getting divorced anyway. Eh? At the moment Darren heard the word divorce from me, his face turned even paler. Divorce? You're joking, right? Why would I stay married to a cheating fraudster like you? You think you can live on your own after being a comfortable housewife all this time? I'm not just a housewife, I work from home. I can live perfectly fine without you. You mean you were actually working at home? I thought you were just pretending. Darren looked at me with surprise. I'm also demanding $30,000 in alimony for your infidelity. I can't pay anymore. What am I supposed to do if the amount increases? You'll have to work hard, I guess. You'll probably be fired from your current job though. Eh? Lorna is actually the daughter of the vice president of your client company. What? I thought she was just a receptionist. That was the secret she hadn't told Darren. I kept it hidden because I thought it'd be difficult to date if you knew my position. I've already informed her father about everything. Of course, your company knows too. I had already reported to Darren's boss about his marriage fraud with the receptionist and that a police report was filed, and his arrest was imminent. But I'm capable at work. Even if I get arrested, I'll have chances to keep working. There's no way they'll keep you. As soon as the facts are confirmed, you'll be disciplined by the company. Almost certainly fired. That's impossible. Darren held his head, making a face as if to say I'm in despair. It was nauseating. Lorna, let's get married after I divorce Anita. Then it won't be fraud, right? I refuse. Anita, let's start over. We can overcome this and become a real couple. Your jokes should be only that silly face of yours. Lorna and I kicked out the pitifully clinging Darren from the house and celebrated with a high five. Later, Darren and I divorced, and I demanded the planned alimony. Darren was found guilty of marriage fraud from Lorna's report. She also claimed alimony and damages. After being fired and burdened with a huge debt, it's hard for a criminal to find employment. Even his parents disowned him, and he now lives and works at a quite terrible workplace. Lorna and I became friends. We occasionally enjoy drinks together and have fun. It's cold. Mom, help me. Margaret, my daughter who should be at my ex-husband Walter's house, suddenly called my mobile phone asking for help. In the dead of winter, with heavy snow falling, Margaret had been locked in the storage shed by her stepmother Ashley for over 4 hours. In a panic, I rushed over and managed to break open the shed door, only to find Margaret shivering and barely conscious inside. Margaret, hang in there! No matter how many times I called her, Margaret didn't respond, her face pale and bloodless. I hurriedly got her into the waiting ambulance and headed to the hospital, praying all the way. I'll never forgive Walter and Ashley for doing such a terrible thing to Margaret. Clenching my fists tightly, I resolved to seek revenge. I am Natasha, 29 years old. My husband Walter was my high school classmate and is now an office worker. We got married 8 years ago, and then I became a housewife. We were blessed with a child and lived happily as a family of 3 with our 7-year-old daughter Margaret. But things changed when Margaret started kindergarten. Walter began to look down on me, and unable to bear it, I divorced him 6 months ago. Of course I wanted to take custody of Margaret, but Walter strongly opposed. How can a housewife like you raise Margaret? I couldn't argue, but I couldn't let Walter take custody of Margaret just like that. The court ruled in his favor due to my lack of income and having no living parents to rely on, and Walter took custody of Margaret. Margaret, I'm sorry, Mom can't live with you anymore. My words broke off in tears, and Margaret, clinging to me, cried out loud. I don't want to be away from Mom. I'm sorry. I promise, I'll come to get you as soon as I can. I hugged Margaret gently, making a pinky promise. Wiping her tears. Okay, I'll wait. Margaret forced a smile and said. Since living apart from Margaret, I met her about once a month, enjoying shopping and chatting together, cherishing our mother-daughter time. Margaret became more clingy, always sticking close to me. Our happy times flew by, and every goodbye left Margaret with tears in her eyes, making me feel lonely too. Eager to live with Margaret again, I threw myself into job hunting and finally found a job, making ends meet. But still financially unable to take Margaret back, I worked hard, saving every penny I could. Then, 2 months after the divorce, I received a postcard from Walter announcing his remarriage, complete with a photo. His new wife, Ashley, was visibly pregnant. She looked like she was almost due for delivery. Was he cheating on me while we were married? Suspecting Walter, I called him. "Congratulations on your marriage, Walter." How do you know that? "A postcard arrived, with your photo." "Didn't you send it?" "No, I didn't." Walter gave a vague answer, so I'm sure that postcard was sent by Ashley just to harass us. "You seem so happy, good for you." Thank you." He seemed embarrassed. When I asked to speak to Margaret over the phone, "Mom, Ashley's going to have a baby soon," Margaret told me excitedly. Margaret, don't say unnecessary things." I heard Walter's panicked voice, and then he abruptly hung up the phone. So it's true. He was cheating even before the divorce. He's always been bad at lying or deceiving, so his panic probably confirms it. Yet, I feel ashamed for not realizing it sooner. From that day, Walter hardly let me see Margaret. When I said I wanted to talk to Margaret, he was blatantly annoyed. "Ashley's getting annoyed, so stop calling, okay? I just want to see Margaret. Please, let me see her. Are you trying to ruin my family? Stop it already." Walter said that and hung up, not answering my calls after. I'm Margaret's mom. It's frustrating not to even be able to see her. I felt down from the helplessness but couldn't give up. I immediately went to a mobile phone shop and bought a pink kid's mobile phone that Margaret would like. Then, I waited near her elementary school and looked for Margaret as she was coming home. "Margaret. Welcome home. Mom." When Margaret saw me, her face lit up with joy, and she ran to hug me. "I'm sorry we couldn't meet for so long." "Yeah. I was lonely, but I was patient. Dad said if I'm good, I can see Mom." Yay! I handed the kid's mobile phone to the excited Margaret. "Call me anytime. But it's a secret from Dad and your new mom, so don't get caught, okay?" "Wow. Thanks, Mom." "Got it, it's a secret." Seeing Margaret's happy face made me smile too. From that day, we messaged each other daily, talking about school and friends. "Margaret, are you having any trouble?" When I asked, worried. "Don't worry, Mom. I'm okay," she always replied. Each time I saw those words, I felt relieved. "I'm always on your side, Margaret. I love you," I told her every day. Even though we were apart and couldn't meet, I felt happy to be connected with her through messages. 2 weeks later. In the evening after work, it was snowing. Shivering in the cold, I was heading home when Margaret suddenly called me. "Mom, it's cold, help me." Margaret's desperate voice came through, asking for my help, and my heart raced. "Where are you now?" "In the house's storage shed." According to Margaret, Ashley had locked her in there for over 4 hours. I was almost panicking but tried to stay calm not to scare Margaret. "I'll come to help you right away, just wait a little bit." "Okay, I understand." Right after hanging up, I tried calling Walter's mobile phone several times, but he didn't answer. I was so worried about Margaret that I hurried to Walter's house. Upon arriving, the house was dark, no car, and it seemed no one was inside. What is going on here? I tried to open the storage shed where Margaret was said to be locked in, but it was locked. I broke the door with a shovel nearby and found Margaret inside, curled up and shivering from the cold. "Margaret! It's Mom!" Margaret, barely conscious, had a weak response to her name, and she felt very hot to the touch. I immediately called an ambulance and accompanied Margaret to the hospital. Why did this happen? During the transport, I kept repeating these words in my head, looking at Margaret's ashen face. I had been too reassured by Margaret's messages saying, "Don't worry, I'm okay." Why didn't I realize something was wrong sooner? I continued to blame myself for my naivety. At the hospital, the doctor told me, "She's in a very critical condition." Holding Margaret's cold hand as she lay in the bed, unconscious, I felt a burning anger. I will never forgive Walter and Ashley for what they did to Margaret. I'll make sure they pay. I had decided on my revenge. That night, Walter called me. Apparently, he had heard from the neighbors about the ambulance at his house and my presence. "Don't take Margaret away like that. Give her back. Don't interfere with our parenting." I could hear Ashley's yelling voice too, perhaps on speaker mode. "The custody is mine. I won't let you get away with this." "That's right. We'll report this to the police." Amidst their uproar, I took a deep breath and calmly said, "Margaret has passed away." "What?" Walter gasped. After a moment of silence, he asked with a trembling voice, "You're lying, right?" "It's all your fault." Then, in contrast to Walter, I heard Ashley laughing loudly. "Ah ha ha ha. Good riddance. She always compared me to you and never called me mom. I never liked her anyway." I was shocked. Could it be that for such reasons, this woman was harsh on a 7-year-old Margaret, even locking her in a storage shed? Besides, Margaret never looked like me. I even wondered if she was really my child. Encouraged by Ashley's words, Walter joined in. I was barely able to contain my rising fury. Was Margaret really my child? Maybe she was another man's child? Their mocking laughter came from the other side of the phone. It was too much to bear. I didn't want to talk to these scum any longer. With trembling hands, I said, "I'll handle the funeral arrangements. I'll contact you when the date is set." After hanging up, I sighed deeply. How could they say such horrible things in this situation? I couldn't stop my tears from falling, feeling both sad and frustrated. The next day, I received an unexpected call from Mrs. Simmons, who lives next door to Walter's house. We were close before, and she told me a shocking fact. I immediately called the place she mentioned, confirmed the fact she told me, and gathered some more evidence. Now I can bring them down. Wait for me, Margaret. Then I told Walter I want to discuss Margaret's funeral arrangements, and arranged to visit his house the following Sunday. On Sunday, I visited Walter's house with a man, and Walter and Ashley reluctantly welcomed us. "You were supposed to handle everything, weren't you? But there are funeral expenses and other things, right? I don't have that much money." "Huh? What a hassle." Walter scratched his head and, turning to the man sitting with us, arrogantly crossed his arms and demanded, "Hey, make the funeral for Margaret cheaper. Just give us the cheapest plan with a discount." They both seemed to mistake the companion for a funeral director, as I had told them we were meeting for funeral arrangements. "Hey, Walter. Do we even need to have a funeral? It's like throwing money away, right?" "We have to, for appearances." "Well, Margaret's life insurance will pay out a lot, and the rest depends on my negotiation skills." Walter, with a triumphant smirk, was adoringly gazed at by Ashley. "Life insurance, huh? Wonder if that will go smoothly." As I muttered, Walter glared at me and said, "Huh?" So, I presented a voice recorder in front of him. "Please listen to this first." What played was a recording of Ashley yelling and Margaret crying out. The sound alone was heart-wrenching. Walter and Ashley looked at each other in confusion. "This isn't Margaret's voice." "Yeah, right. Must be someone else." They desperately tried to deny it was Margaret, but I looked at them squarely. "No. This voice is definitely Margaret's. Don't you recognize the voice of someone you live with every day?" Still, Walter and Ashley insisted it was a mistake. So, I took out my mobile phone and showed them a video. "Still going to make excuses after this?" It was a video of Ashley forcibly trying to lock a resisting Margaret in the storage shed. Both the woman and Margaret's faces were clearly visible in the footage. There was no way they could deny it now. Why do you have such a video? The dash camera at Mrs. Simmons' parking lot next door caught it. Some cameras still record even if the car isn't moving. The audio was recorded by Mrs. Simmons too, who was worried about Margaret. Mrs. Simmons had always been fond of Margaret since she was little. She told me over the phone how she had been concerned about Margaret's well-being since I left the house. Gradually, she noticed Margaret losing her energy and thought something was off when she started hearing yelling from the house. Mrs. Simmons was worried and reported to Child Services. Ashley, you turned away the social workers who came several times without letting them see Margaret, right? Shut up. It was just too much trouble. Yeah, having them come over is just annoying. It's Margaret's fault for not listening, it was just discipline. We were just trying to correct her behavior. What's wrong with that? Yelling and forcibly locking her in a storage shed is discipline? Don't be ridiculous. Margaret isn't your toy. Walter and Ashley, still defiant, even had faint smirks on their faces. I decided it was time to introduce the man who had been with me. Just so you know, this man isn't a funeral director. He's the director of Child Services. The man, who had been quietly observing until now. Sorry for the late introduction, he said, extending his business card to Walter. Walter and Ashley's faces turned pale instantly. The director's expression became stern. What you've done is a serious crime. And he said in a cold voice, you're exaggerating. As a director, you should understand that scolding a misbehaving child is a parent's duty. Exactly. Just titles and no sense in what you're saying. Walter and Ashley were still defiant. Enough already. Everything you've done has been testified by Margaret. At my words, Walter momentarily opened his mouth in shock. Then, he suddenly burst out laughing. Ahahaha. How can someone who's dead do that? Ridiculous. Yeah, what's she talking about? Ahahaha. As they pointed at me and laughed, I smiled and informed them. Oh, Margaret is very much alive. What? That was a lie to prevent you from taking her back. Hearing this, Walter and Ashley were shocked, their mouths opening and closing like fish. So, Margaret was a nuisance to you, right? You clearly said that. Then why didn't you give me custody when we divorced? That's because I didn't want to pay you child support. What? That's outrageous. You're the worst, not just as a husband, but as a father too. I was furious to realize the true shallowness of this man who had fought me in court to take away my dear Margaret. I'll take Margaret's custody back through court if I have to, and I'll make sure you both pay. Natasha, don't say scary things. You can have Margaret, okay? Isn't that enough? Not at all. Isn't reflecting and atoning for what you've done also a father's responsibility? Walter still didn't seem to be taking things seriously, so I decided to press further. And one more thing. Ashley was pregnant before we got divorced, right? What are you talking about? Walter's gaze wavered, and Ashley looked down, visibly shaken. No matter how much you try to cover it up, a simple investigation will reveal the truth. Be prepared to pay compensation. That's nonsense now. Can't we just let bygones be bygones? I apologize, so please, let it go. I will never forgive you. That's why I've filed a police report. Upon hearing about the police, Walter's attitude changed abruptly, and he stood up to apologize deeply. I don't want to get arrested. Margaret's alive, right? Natasha, please overlook this. I beg you. Beside him, the previously defiant Ashley also bowed deeply to me. I'm about to give birth. Please, Natasha. Withdraw the report right now. I despised these two for their selfishness to the core. The director also said sternly, "Why don't you just give up?" But suddenly, Walter and Ashley tried to flee, rushing to the door. However, they were promptly arrested by the waiting police officers. "It's not my fault. Ashley did everything." "What? You're the one who told me to lock her in the shed." The two of them were shouting and resisting in vain. Their commotion attracted the neighbors, who gathered around. In front of the crowd, Walter and Ashley were taken away in the police car. Some time later, Walter and Ashley were sentenced to serve time in a trial. I filed for a change of guardianship and finally got Margaret back. "I'm happy that I can be with you," Margaret says with the brightest smile. Determined to ensure a fulfilling life for my daughter, I resolved, I will make Margaret happy, no matter what. Stop leeching off me already! For over 2 decades, I thought I was giving my all to William. Yet, this is how he sees me? I wasn't leeching off him. I was just devoted to you. That's what I thought, but the words wouldn't come. As my strength drained away, William continued. "Now that Daniel's working, you've got no reason to leech off me anymore." "But..." "Shut up. I don't want to hear your excuses." William raised his voice. "It's over." My feelings never reached him. Just as I realized that, I heard something snap inside me. It was the sound of the thread of love that had been connecting our hearts, snapping. At the same time, my feelings for William began to fade. We were spouses just moments ago, but now, we're like strangers. William was just using me all along. He never loved me. Otherwise, he wouldn't brazenly cheat and try to kick me out. I don't care what happens to such a man. The only option left is to completely crush him. I've made up my mind. I lifted my face and gazed at William. "My name is Susan, I'm 50 years old. I've been married to my husband William for 25 years. Our son Daniel, born a few years after we got married, graduated from college and started working this year. Child rearing is done, and now I can do what I want. That's what I'm thinking right now. But there's just one problem. That's my relationship with William. William is not a good husband or father. In fact, it's hard to find anything good about him. He cheats, and he doesn't even give me a proper salary. I at least want you to give me enough money for living expenses." "Huh? Don't get cocky when you're living off me." William always snaps back like this. I guess it's hopeless. Maybe divorce is the only option. Lately, I've been thinking about it more and more. But I can't just say I want a divorce easily. The reason is, my FIL Stephen, who is sick and hospitalized, asked me to take care of William. I owe Stephen, and as long as I can bear it, I have to endure it, don't I? I can't ignore Stephen's words, but my desire to divorce is strong. Caught between these conflicting feelings, I find myself reminiscing about the happier times before marriage. Ironically, that happiness began with a misfortune that befell my father. Our family ran a small restaurant. My father was in charge of cooking, and my mother managed the hall. Needless to say, the food was delicious. However, my father was incredibly bad at business. He started the restaurant with the desire to fill his customers' bellies with delicious food. That's a noble sentiment, I believe. But that sentiment alone drove his business. So, he hardly thought about profit. It didn't matter if the profit was small. As long as the customers were satisfied, that was enough for him. Obviously, this was no way to make a profit. As a result, our family's finances were always on the edge. Yet, seeing the satisfied customers, I felt proud, even as a child. So, I never interfered with my father's business. But during my college years, a crisis struck. The company supplying ingredients to my father's restaurant went bankrupt due to the recession. We had already paid for this month's supply, but now, we faced the prospect of closing the restaurant. Our management was already barely scraping by. There was no extra money to spare. Seeing my parents disheartened made me anxious too. But as a college student, there wasn't much I could do. Nor did it seem likely that the bankrupt company would refund us. The only option left for us was to close the restaurant. That's when a regular customer said, "Closing down? But the food is so good. What a waste." "But the supplier has gone bankrupt, and we're likely to be saddled with debt." "Then let me support you personally. Use it to revive the restaurant." The regular, true to his word, lent my father the money. "We appreciate it. We'll definitely pay you back." "Don't worry about the money for now. Just keep making delicious meals." After saying that, the man quickly left the restaurant. Later, my father started dealing with a different food company. The regular was apparently involved in a large-scale food distribution business, and we got our supplies at a cheaper rate than before. Fortuitously, our family's restaurant was saved from bankruptcy. About a year later, I went with my father to repay the money to the regular customer. While my father was talking to the man, a young man approached me. "So you borrowed money from my father?" It turned out, he was the son of the man who lent us the money. His name was William, and he worked in his father's company. "You're pretty. How about going out with me?" "Me, with you?" "Come on, think of it as a way to say thanks for the loan." We were indeed saved by the loan, and my father had properly expressed our gratitude. I didn't think we owed anything more, but then William whispered to me, "I could spread rumors that the restaurant's daughter is ungrateful." That would be. I couldn't talk back. I thought it wouldn't affect me even if he spread rumors, but it could cause trouble for my father. And what would the restaurant's customers think? With these thoughts, I found myself unable to refuse William's offer. I didn't like it, but I decided to endure it, just this once. While pondering all this, I went out with William. But once we were out, it was more enjoyable than I expected. William was entertaining, knew various fun spots, and had a great taste in choosing places. Despite the terrible first impression, he might actually be a decent person. Thinking that was my mistake, I was swiftly wrapped around William's finger. Being with Susan is fun. I'm having fun too. With a nice girl like you, I'm thinking for the first time I could marry. Swept up by such simple words, I started dating William with a view of marriage. William continued to manipulate me in various ways. Eventually, a few years later, I found myself married to William. Of course, I never imagined then that it was all William's trap. He was kind and I felt loved by William. But it was all a lie. As soon as we got married, William showed his true colors. "Here's this month's salary. Manage it well." Opening the envelope William handed me, I found a handwritten salary slip. The salary itself was deposited into the bank, so a slip alone wasn't odd. But it was strange that the salary slip was handwritten. Nowadays, handwritten documents are almost unheard of, but when I got married, it was 25 years ago. It was a time when computers were just beginning to become commonplace, and handwritten salary slips didn't seem out of place. "There's more than $1,000, it seems enough," I muttered to myself, trying to be convinced. I managed somehow with that modest amount of money. As married life went on, I started to feel something was off. It was William's lifestyle. William left home at a fixed time every morning, but his return was always erratic. It varied daily. "I'm busy with various tasks as my dad's successor." "Then, at least let me know before you come home." "Stop nagging, I get it. I'll call," William shouted. His attitude made me feel even more uneasy. Maybe he's out having fun. Perhaps there's someone else. Though I suspected, I couldn't confront him because I disliked being yelled at. In the end, I couldn't voice my doubts about William's behavior. Then Daniel was born. I thought things might change with a child. But William's attitude remained unchanged. Looking back, I think that's when it started. I began to vaguely consider divorce. And it was around the time Daniel started middle school. I received a call from my mother while I was out shopping for dinner. "What, Dad's hospitalized?" It was news that my father was admitted to the hospital. I rushed to the hospital. Mom's just making a big deal on the phone, my father said, laughing heartily. I was relieved. But at that moment, I remembered something and my heart skipped a beat. I made a mistake. I hadn't contacted William. By then, it was too late. My mobile phone was flooded with calls from William. Panicking, I called back, only to hear William's irritated voice.
Where the hell are you and what are you doing? Get back here and make my dinner.
I'm sorry, Dad is...
What? Dad? Your father?
William's tone was stern as he questioned me. I answered in a small voice. Yes, he was suddenly hospitalized.
Your father doesn't matter. You're my wife.
Startled by William's loud voice, I closed my eyes. I was terrified of his shouting, but I knew I had to stand up for myself. I gathered my courage and retorted. Is it wrong to be worried about my dad? That should be allowed, right?
Shut up. Don't talk back to me.
No, I will say this. You would rush to your own father, wouldn't you? William fell silent when I asked that. I thought it would hit close to home. But his reply was unimaginable.
Huh? I'd ignore it if my dad was hospitalized. After all, I wouldn't be troubled if he wasn't around.
I was speechless. That had to be a lie. But I couldn't deny it. After much hesitation, I told William. I'm different from you. Sorry, but you'll have to eat out tonight. That was all I could muster. I hung up the phone, still in a daze. Since that incident, I truly couldn't believe in William anymore. It was then I realized that the happy times before marriage were all an illusion.
Oh, I see. William didn't want a wife, he wanted a maid.
Saying it out loud made me sad. But I couldn't just dwell on the sadness. If I was going to divorce, I needed to prepare. I started preparing for a divorce. Years passed. And then Stephen was hospitalized. His condition was quite serious. He might not be able to leave the hospital. I relayed Stephen's medical condition to William, but he was unfazed. Does that mean it's going to cost money? It's not the time to worry about money, don't you understand? I understand. I'll contact my brother Donald. William reached out to Donald, my brother-in-law. Donald was married but had no children. So William asked if Donald could help with the hospital bills. Can you pay? It's tough for us, with Daniel and Susan and all. His attitude was as if it was someone else's problem. It reminded me of when my own father was hospitalized. It was clear he didn't care about Stephen at all. I couldn't bear it anymore. Enough. I'll manage somehow and pay for Stephen's hospital bills.
Don't forget what you just said.
William shouted. I nodded firmly. Ultimately, my declaration led to our family bearing the cost of Stephen's hospital bills. Moreover, Stephen stepped down from his position as president due to his illness. And William took over. Regardless, William didn't like that I had stood up to him. Since then, he started blatantly not coming home. Even when discussing Daniel's future plans. William ignored my calls and didn't come home. Dad's not coming home again today. I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm causing you trouble. It's fine, I don't care about Dad. More importantly, I want to go to college in Boston. That's right. Don't worry about tuition, I'll manage somehow. Soon after, Daniel's admission to a college in Boston was secured. As expected, William didn't see Daniel off. Once Daniel moved to Boston, the house became eerily quiet. By then, William's visits had dwindled to about once a week. There's also Stephen's hospital bills, could you transfer a little more? What? I've already transferred more than half of my salary. It should be enough for you now. The money William transferred was meager. It was clearly just a fraction of his salary. The claim of transferring more than half was undoubtedly a lie. I knew that. But I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. Years passed, and I got news that Daniel had landed a job. With Daniel employed, it might be time to bring up divorce. Over these years, I had prepared for divorce. Now, it's just about the right timing. Where and when can I bring it up to avoid arguments? Such thoughts kept haunting me. It's not about arguments, though. I chuckled wryly to myself. Then, one day, I had been visiting Stephen at the hospital. After chatting about trivial things, I headed back home as usual. As I tried to unlock the door, I was shocked. For some reason, the door was already open. Could it be a burglar? I cautiously peeked inside. From the living room, I could hear the TV and William's laughter. Relieved that William was home, I entered the living room. There, William was watching TV and laughing heartily. "You're home."
Yeah, I was thinking of tidying up.
Tidying up? Heeding William's words, I looked around. On closer inspection, some items in the room were missing.
It seems like something's missing.
Yeah, I threw it away. Your stuff. My stuff? Stunned, I went back to my room. The room was silent, the computer, TV, even my favorite cup were gone. Not just that, the bed and everything else had disappeared.
What's the meaning of this?
I threw it out because we don't need it anymore.
Don't need it anymore? What are we supposed to do now?
As I raised my voice, William frowned. Then he averted his gaze and sighed. Frankly, I'm tired of supporting you.
What are you talking about? I'm your wife.
As I retorted, William grimaced and suddenly raised his voice.
Do I have to spell it out for you? Stop leeching off me.
For over 2 decades, I thought I was giving my all to William. Yet, this is how he sees me? I'm not leeching off you. I was just devoted to you. I thought that, but the words wouldn't come. As my strength drained away, William continued. Now that Daniel is working, you've got no reason to leech off me anymore.
But... Shut up! I don't want to hear your excuses.
William raised his voice. It's no use. My feelings never reached him. At that moment, I heard something snap inside me. It was the sound of the thread of love that had been connecting our hearts, snapping. At the same time, my feelings for William began to fade. Moments ago, we were a couple, but now we're like strangers. William had been using me all along. He never loved me. Otherwise, he wouldn't brazenly cheat and try to drive me out. I don't care what happens to such a man. The only option left is to completely crush him. Resolved, I looked up and faced William.
What? Got a complaint?
No. If you want me to leave, I will. I briskly closed the living room door behind me and headed to my room. But there was nothing of mine left. Not a single piece of my clothing remained. Don't bother looking. I had the garbage collection service take it all.
Which service?
There's a flyer here. That one. I picked up the service's flyer from the floor. As I dialed the number, I told William. You'll regret this. Leaving those words behind, I immediately left the house. The call connected right away. I explained the situation, and the person on the line understood immediately. It seemed William's actions had already raised suspicions. So, the garbage collection service had kept everything as it was. I'll be there right away. Thank you. I thanked them politely and ended the call. Afterward, I went to the service's place. After expressing my gratitude, I had my belongings moved to a newly rented storage unit. Relieved that my possessions were safe. I don't think getting away with something like this comes without a price. I clenched my teeth and called Daniel. After briefly explaining the situation, I ended with, So, I've decided to move out, considering a divorce. Daniel, please be prepared for that. All right? Got it. Bye. Daniel hung up. He seemed scared of me. Was I that angry? Puzzled, I put my mobile phone in my bag. and headed to a nearby hotel. I already had a new place lined up. The reason was simple. I had been planning to discuss divorce with William soon. Divorce and move there. That was my plan for starting a new life. The schedule just moved up a bit. So honestly, I wasn't troubled. It's just that plans have moved forward by about 2 weeks. 2 weeks of hotel living. What a waste. A bad habit of a housewife, thinking about waste. I wonder if I should bill him for the hotel expenses.
Either way, be prepared, William.
I muttered and then started working on the post-divorce actions I had planned in advance. Around 10 days into my hotel stay, William called. He raised his voice as soon as I answered.
You took my money.
What are you talking about?
Don't play dumb. It's about Dad's hospital bills. The hospital just called asking for payment.
Oh, that. While thinking, I sighed and responded. You should pay it. It's no longer my concern after being kicked out.
I've been transferring living expenses to you. That's supposed to cover it.
Yes, but where's that bank account? Isn't it with you now? I retorted nonchalantly. But that account was empty. I couldn't help but laugh, knowing that.
There's an account, but it's empty. That's why I'm saying you took the money.
I haven't taken anything.
Don't lie. Who else could use it?
Didn't he realize how little he had transferred? I retorted, almost in disbelief. It was just too little to begin with. If there's no money for the hospital bills, why don't you use your allowance?
Allowance?
William started to panic, evidently thinking I didn't know. Since the beginning of our marriage, William had been giving me handwritten salary slips. That was to hide the fact that he was skimming part of his salary. In other words, the skimmed money was William's allowance. I asked Stephen once, how much is William's salary?
So, what about it?
He looked puzzled but told me. So, I know you've been taking money. When I confronted him, William fell silent. After a long pause, so long I thought the call had dropped, William suddenly raised his voice.
What's wrong with me spending the money I earned? It's your fault for spending all the money I gave you.
Uh-huh. And then?
We're getting a divorce. I'll demand alimony. And you'll return the money you've squandered.
William blurted that out, and I smiled triumphantly. I had caught him in his own words. Now William couldn't escape. I was smiling as I retorted to him. I appreciate that. I wanted a divorce too. Come over to discuss it.
No, I mean,
I want the divorce too. I'll be waiting with evidence of your infidelity. Though I couldn't see him, I imagined William's face turning pale. It was evident in his shaky voice.
What infidelity evidence?
Pretending won't help. I have photographic evidence.
Photographic evidence?
I could almost see William stuttering. Holding back laughter, I continued. I'll give you the address, so let's meet there next Sunday to talk in detail. I unilaterally gave him an address and hung up the phone. I had successfully confronted him with divorce. Now, if I could make him apologize. Honestly, that would be the hardest part. I braced myself for it. Then, on the agreed Sunday, I was at the meeting place well before the scheduled time. I think he should be arriving soon. I glanced around and soon saw William. Over here. I called out to William and he looked up in surprise.
Here?
Yes. I gave you the address, remember?
No, but this place, whose mansion is it?
William looked past me. There stood a mansion worth about $1 million. Much larger than an ordinary house, it boasted a vast garden. And was 3 stories high, complete with a home theater. Luxury cars were parked in the built-in garage. Pointing at the mansion, I smiled. This is my house. It's newly built, so it's pretty nice, right?
Your house?
Yes. I was planning to live here after the divorce, so I started building it a little while ago. Yes. The place I had summoned William to was my newly built house. Naturally, William, who had always seen me as just a housewife, was dumbfounded. Pushing such a William from behind, I entered the house. I led William to the living room.
Shall we discuss then? This is my lawyer.
I introduced my lawyer, who was waiting inside. But William was hardly in a state to pay attention. His gaze was unsettled, constantly scanning the surroundings. He didn't even try to look at the photos of his infidelity laid out on the table. He didn't respond when spoken to. Frankly, it was hardly a conversation. Eventually, William murmured in a low voice,
"How did you afford a house like this?"
Although I was amused by his curiosity, I answered, "I bought it normally."
Liar! A housewife can't afford something like this.
To buy a $1 million house, one would need an annual income of around $150,000. However, I had that much income. So, I confidently replied, "I earn that much. Do you have a problem with that?"
No, but how did you?
I kind of helped out at a friend's company, and before I knew it, things turned out this way. The story goes back a few years. When I had decided to divorce due to the trouble over my father's hospitalization, I started preparing for it, beginning with finding a job. After the divorce, I couldn't survive without a job. So, I started looking for a job that would allow me to live independently. But there weren't any good ones. That's when I consulted my best friend, Lisa.
Why don't you help me with my work?
What work do you do?
Aquaculture on land.
Land-based aquaculture involves artificially creating facilities like pools and breeding fish in them. Despite some disadvantages, it's an eco-friendly method that prevents marine pollution. Lisa's father started it, and now Lisa was taking it over. So, I started working there. William asked tentatively. Once I started helping out, the business suddenly began doing well. What I did was mainly negotiations and administrative work. But Lisa said I was a big help. And I was promoted to an executive position. It was all coincidental, but I believe luck is part of one's ability. Listening to my story, William looked downcast. After a moment of thought, he suddenly looked up. "Let's forget the divorce talk. How about we start over?" As he spoke, I looked at him coldly and replied, "Stop joking." "No, it's not a joke, I really want to start over with you." William only wanted my money. So, I raised an eyebrow and retorted, "I dislike people who cheat. And those who neglect Stephen."
No, about Dad.
Quiet. You may not know, but I paid for your father's hospital bills. The money William had given me was indeed very little. After paying for groceries, high utility bills, and other miscellaneous expenses, nothing was left. That was all he ever gave. Naturally, there was no way it could cover Stephen's hospital bills. Initially, I managed somehow, but after starting my job, I paid the bills with my own salary. Despite that, you wouldn't listen to me, and you never visited Stephen.
That's because, well,
how can I trust someone like that? As I raised my voice, William looked down. Then, the lawyer proceeded with the discussion about alimony. William was speechless. He remained silent and downcast until the end. Urged by the lawyer, William eventually signed the divorce papers. The alimony was set at $30,000. "Now that we are divorced, you'll be responsible for your father's hospital bills." Understood. William nodded reluctantly. At least he didn't argue. I was relieved. Finally, I made sure William left, practically chasing him out. It was over at last. The only regret was that I didn't get an apology from William, but I had one last move. That would make him apologize. I couldn't help but smile at the thought. A few days later, after visiting the company, I was called from behind on my way home.
"Hey, Susan!"
I turned around to see William. "Don't call me like we're familiar. We're divorced now."
"Shut up!" What the hell did you do?
William was looking at me with a flushed face. I realized what this was about. Ah, so that was the talk at the company. With that in mind, I said to him with a smile, "What do you think I did?"
Don't mess with me. Tell me how you got me fired.
William's outburst was amusing, and I couldn't help but smile.
It's your responsibility. You got fired as a consequence for having an affair with the company's clerk.
William's affair was with a clerk at his own company. He had been doing as he pleased, thinking he was untouchable as the president. After the divorce was settled, I reported the affair to Stephen. Stephen was furious about William's actions, while also saddened by our divorce. I showed Stephen the evidence photos of the affair, which enraged him further. Then, Stephen made an unexpected offer.
I'm going to transfer all my company shares to you, Susan.
To me? Wouldn't Donald?
No, I want to give them to you. Use them to dethrone William from his position.
Stephen explained the situation. His company was a corporation, requiring shareholder meetings or board resolutions for key decisions. Of course, decisions can also be made through board resolutions. However, it wasn't a large company. Stephen owned most of the issued shares. This meant he could make decisions as a single shareholder. In smaller companies, it's common for the president to own the majority of shares. So, by inheriting Stephen's shares, I could exercise voting rights on my own. But it wasn't me who decided to fire William. I informed Donald about acquiring the shares, and just reported William's affair. The rest was Donald's decision.
Donald was considerate. That guy! Why is he doing what you say? It's not about doing what I say. He made the decision for the company's best interest.
Hearing this, William collapsed on the spot. Then he began to plead, clinging desperately.
I was wrong. I apologize, please forgive me. Without a job, I'll be on the streets.
But that's not my concern. It's all his responsibility.
I won't forgive you even if you apologize. Please, I'm begging you. Forgive me.
William repeatedly offered deep apologies right there. I turned away.
I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do. Why not? If you have the shares. I sold them to Donald and his wife. I don't want anything to do with you anymore.
At that moment, I heard William's loud voice. Of course, I pretended not to hear and walked away. After being ousted as the president, William had to leave the company. He might have stayed if he were an employee, but William had joined the company through Stephen's connections and had always been arrogant.
I'd never be just an employee,
he used to boast. So, as soon as he was removed from his position, he was kicked out. Now he's working a part-time job at a grocery store, but re-employment at his age will be difficult. He's likely to spend his later years in poverty, filled with intense regret. As for me, after the divorce, I became more dedicated to my work. While I don't think I'll remarry, I have several male colleagues. Spring might come again. It was then when I had these thoughts. I received a call from Daniel.
I'm bringing my girlfriend over next time. That's wonderful. I'm looking forward to it.
I failed in my marriage, but I don't want Daniel to experience the same. But he'll be fine. Daniel is much more sensible than I was.